Amy choked on her breath. You wouldn't dare want to test me. You're the one who kissed me on impulse. Let's call it a compensatory urge. Amy closed her eyes and tried to figure out a way out of this problem. Sadly, she couldn't come across one decent meal. Nicholas grinned right away. I will pick you up at 8. Amy waved a finger at him. If this is some millionaire human sacrifice plan, I need a lawyer. Nicholas laughed, saying you will survive. I work, pay bills, and occasionally kiss strangers to escape ex-boyfriends. Nicholas laughed quietly. She sat down and Amy tried to ignore how comfortable he looked. She leaned his elbow on the table. Tell me about you. Amy raised an eyebrow. Why? Nicholas grinned brilliantly. A natural talent or self-taught. I'm enrolled since sadly there isn't a technical course for it. Amy rolled her eyes. And what else do you do? Other being a rude millionaire, I control events to benefit me. Amy laughed. I've seen. Nicholas shrugged. Yet here you are enjoying supper with me. Amy turned to face her glass of wine. There was no decision for me. Nicholas laughed. She hated to admit it, but she was really having fun before he dropped the bombshell. I provide a suggestion. If it entails anything unlawful, Amy scowled. Nicholas grinned and stayed with me for a month. Amy spat out her water. What you heard me say? I understood this was a human sacrifice not at all necessary, hence I simply needed you to pass for my girlfriend. Amy watched him, wondering why Nicholas spun his wine glass. Let us claim some people must believe it. Amy arched an eyebrow. And I'm the perfect fit. Following that kiss is definitely, Amy felt her face flame up. What should I do? Nicholas grinned. Whatever you want. Amy bit her mouth. Though it was the most ridiculous concept available, it could be entertaining. Amy was the type to take half an hour to choose an ice cream flavor, the type to buy days deciding whether to buy a new outfit. Here she was sitting across from Nicholas Scott, the richest man in town, seriously considering a fake dating contract. She looked at him completely at ease, as if he were closing a big business deal. Amy still doubted whether this was some strange dream or a major error about to occur. Let me clear this for you. She bent her head. You want me to act as your girlfriend for a month in return. I may ask for everything I want. Nicholas nodded with a half smile. Amy closed her eyes and asked, why me? Could you hire a professional actress, a model, someone with a little more class and a little less unicorns on their shirt? Nicholas looked at her t-shirt and grinned. The unicorn had personality. I appreciated Amy rolling her eyes. Nicholas, why me? He slanted slightly. Since you knew nothing about me. Amy blinked. What has that to do with anything? You kissed me without knowing who I am. That was an accident, a lovely accident. Amy sighed long ago. You still haven't explained why all of this is required. Nicholas twisted his wine glass between his fingers, as if carefully selecting his words. Let's just say my family has some expectations, and a really major occasion is coming up. If I show up alone, it's going to be an issue. Amy folded her arms, considering a dilemma involving a million questions. An attempted planned marriage and maybe a documentary on my romantic life. Amy tried not to chuckle. You know, they're rather strong. Amy stopped for a moment. What he was asking wasn't that crazy, in fact. It was kind of funny. If she thought about it, there were a few perks for her too. Ryan would see that she had moved on and would taste what it was like to live among millionaires. Should things get intolerable, she could just walk away. Nicholas seemed to see her inner conflict and grinned. You're thinking of saying yes, aren't you? Amy frowned. Don't put words in my mouth. I already know your negotiating style. She squinted her eyes at him and considered my style. Amy's mouth opened in amazement. That is not true. Nicholas raised. First you create a big scenario, then you pretend you're not interested, but deep down you're far too inquisitive to turn it down. Eyebrow. No, then say no and walk away. Amy closed her mouth. Darn it. He got her. She looked away thinking, Nicholas was right about the curiosity after all. When else would she get a chance to see what life was really like in the billionaire world? Amy took a deep breath. Okay, I'm in, but I have conditions, Nicholas smiled. Of course you do. Amy held up a finger first. I'm not your employee. I won't take orders from you. I never thought following orders was your strong suit. Good second, I want something in return. Nicholas crossed his arms, intrigued. What is it? Amy smiled. I want you to help me get a better job. Nicholas blinked, surprised. You want a job? Yes, I'm tired of my current one. If I'm going along with this crazy plan, I want something useful in return. Nicholas seemed to think it over, then he held out his hand deal. Amy stared at his hand for a moment. She knew she was about to step into something completely outside her comfort zone. But you know what? Why not? She shook his hand. Deal. Nicholas grinned. Welcome to my world, Lucy. The next morning, Lucy woke up to a message on her phone. Nicholas, I'll pick you up at 10. Wear something comfortable. Lucy frowned. Comfortable for what she had no idea what to expect. But she doubted he was taking her on a picnic, and she was right, because at exactly 10 a.m., Nicholas pulled up in front of her house in a car that probably cost more than the entire house. Lucy looked at the car, then at him seriously. Isn't this a little much? Nothing is too much when you have style. Lucy rolled her eyes and got in. So where are we going? Nicholas gave her a mysterious smile. You'll see, Lucy didn't like surprises, but apparently Nicholas loved mystery, and when they arrived at their destination, she understood why they were at a luxury boutique. Lucy looked around confused. What are we doing here? Nicholas held the door open for her. If you're going to be my girlfriend, you need to dress the part. Lucy froze. Wait a second. Are you saying my clothes aren't good enough? Nicholas glanced at her unicorn t-shirt. I think your unicorn could use a little vacation, Lucy gasped. Offended, this unicorn is a symbol of personality. Now it can be a symbol of retirement. Lucy huffed but stepped inside the store, and half an hour later, she was surrounded by dresses that cost as much as her rent. She tried on a few, feeling like an imposter in the middle of all that luxury. But when she caught Nicholas watching her with a satisfied look, something shifted. He was really committed to this Cade, and strangely, she was starting to find it all pretty amusing. Lucy was still trying to wrap her head around the fact that for the next month, she would be Nicholas Scott's fake girlfriend. The whole situation felt like something out of a soap opera, where the main character gets caught up in a crazy deal, and suddenly her life is turned upside down. And that was exactly how she felt right now, on her way to a high society event, in a luxury car sitting next to the most sought-after billionaire in town. She glanced at Nicholas, who was driving as calmly as if this were just another day for him. Unlike her, who felt her stomach twist at the thought of all the sophisticated people she was about to meet. He seemed immune to nerves, which only made her more anxious. Are you sure this is a good idea? Lucy asked, gripping the hem of the new dress he had bought for her. She still couldn't believe she was wearing something this expensive. If she spilled juice on it, she'd probably have to sell a kidney to pay for the damage. You already agreed to the deal, so there's no backing out. Now, Nicholas replied with an amused glance. Besides, you do great. Just smile, wave, and don't try to run away running away. Doesn't sound like such a bad idea, she muttered. Crossing her arms, remind me of again how you convinced me to do this? I'm very persuasive, he said, simply keeping his eyes on the road. Lucy huffed but couldn't argue. He was persuasive and almost impossible to refuse. When they arrived at the event, Lucy was sure she was in the wrong place. The ballroom was enormous, filled with well-dressed people holding champagne glasses and having conversations so refined she wouldn't even attempt to understand them. This was the kind of setting she'd only seen in magazines and movies. Definitely not something she was used to. Just stay by my side and act like you belong here, Nicholas whispered, taking her hand before stepping inside. Easy for you to say, she muttered, but let him lead her into the room. The reaction was immediate the moment Nicholas entered. All eyes turned to him. Lucy could feel the curious stares on her, as if people were trying to figure out who the woman by his side was. She took a deep breath and straightened her posture. She had agreed to this, so she needed to act like it. It was completely normal, Nicholas. A woman's voice called out, and Lucy saw an elegant woman approaching. She wore a flawless dress and a charming smile, but her eyes were locked on Lucy, sizing her up from head to toe. CLA, it's so good to see you, Nicholas said, greeting her with a polite smile. I'd say the same, but I'm more surprised by your company. You never bring anyone to these events. Claire smiled, but there was a sharp curiosity in her voice. Who's your friend? Nicholas casually wrapped an arm around Lucy's waist to pulling her closer with ease. This is Lucy, my girlfriend. he announced in such a natural tone that Lucy almost laughed. If he was nervous about lying, he certainly didn't show it. Claire raised her eyebrows in surprise. Lucy simply smiled and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you," she said, trying to sound confident. "The pleasure is mine." CLA replied, shaking her hand with a curious look. "No offense, but you don't seem like the kind of woman Nicholas usually brings along." Lucy gave a polite smile, but inside she wanted to ask exactly what that was supposed to mean. Well, I guess he decided to change things up a bit, she replied, keeping her composure. Nicholas let out a quiet chuckle beside her, clearly enjoying the exchange. Claire, however, kept her gaze on Lucy for a few more seconds, before turning back to Nicholas. "I hope she's ready for this world, darling. Not everyone can keep up with you. I think she's doing just fine so far." Nicholas replied without hesitation. Claire gave a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and walked away, most likely to spread the news to the other guests. Lucy let out a sigh and looked at Nicholas. "I don't like her, most people don't," he said casually. Lucy rolled her eyes. "You could have warned me that these people are intense, you didn't ask," he replied with a playful smile. They spent the next hour making their way through the event, greeting people Lucy had never seen before, and listening to conversations about investments, corporate mergers, and extravagant vacations. She did her best to look interested, but honestly, she was more focused on not tripping over her dress. Then in the middle of the night, a familiar voice called from behind her. "Lucy," she turned around and her stomach twisted. Ryan, the ex-boyfriend at the same event, because of course the universe loved making her life complicated. He stared at her with pure shock, as if he couldn't imagine that Lucy could be here. Samantha, clinging to his arm as always, looked just as stunned. "What are you doing here?" Ryan asked, still in disbelief, before Lucy could respond. Nicholas slid an arm around her waist, giving a light squeeze as if preparing for battle. "She's with me," Nicholas said, his voice firm but laced with amusement. "I thought that was obvious." Ryan blinked, completely thrown off. Samantha looked like she was about to burst with curiosity. You two are together?" Ryan asked clearly, trying to make sense of it. Lucy smiled, seizing the moment. "Yes, we're together." Ryan opened and closed his mouth a few times, but no words came out. He glanced between Nicholas and Lucy, as if waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. "Since when?" Samantha asked, crossing her arms. "For a while now," Lucy replied, trying to sound casual. Ryan still looked stunned. Nicholas, on the other hand, seemed quite pleased with the situation. "Well, it was nice seeing you, but we need to go," Nicholas said gently, pulling Lucy away as they walked off. Lucy finally let out the breath she had been holding. "I can't believe he was here." She muttered. "An interesting coincidence," Nicholas said, glancing at her with amusement. "And I must say you handled it very well." "I'm an excellent actress," she replied, trying to ignore how much her mind was spinning. He smiled. "So, are you ready to keep going with the plan?" Lucy took a deep breath. The first challenge was behind her. Now she just had to figure out if she could keep up this act without losing herself in it. "Let's see where this goes," she said, finally relaxing. Nicholas smiled as if he already knew the story was far from over, and deep down Lucy knew it too. Lucy still wasn't sure how she had managed to get through the event without tripping over her dress or accidentally revealing something she shouldn't. But somehow she had pulled it off. The real problem, however, was that now, sitting across from Nicholas Scott in one of the most luxurious offices she had ever seen, she realized this madness was just beginning. "So let's make it official," Nicholas said, flipping through some papers with the ease of someone who did this every day. "Here's the contract outlining our agreement." Lucy narrowed her eyes at him. "Contract? You're joking, right?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Of course not. This is business, Lucy. You didn't think we'd just shake hands and hope for the best, did you?" She crossed her arms. "I kind of hoped it would be simpler." "Nothing involving my family is simple," he replied, sliding the papers across the table toward her. "Besides, the contract ensures that you won't be at a disadvantage." Lucy picked up the documents and started reading her. Her eyes quickly scanned the clauses outlining each of their responsibilities. She was expected to accompany him to social events, maintain the story that they were a couple, and most importantly, keep everything confidential in return. Nicholas would secure her a new job and cover any expenses related to their arrangement. Wow, this feels like one of those movie contracts where the heroine ends up falling for the billionaire boss, Lucy murmured. Nicholas smiled. If this were a movie. We'd already be halfway through the story. She rolled her eyes. So, I just signed this, and for a month I'm officially your girlfriend. Exactly. Lucy bit her lip, thinking it over. What happens if I want to back out halfway through, then you let me know in advance? And we end things quietly? Nicholas replied. But of course it would be best to avoid that. After all, my family's expecting me to finally have a stable life. Lucy held back a laugh. Stable life, you barely know me. My family doesn't need to know that. She sighed, looked at the contract again. She knew this was completely insane, but deep down Lucy said, crossing her arms, the contract is ending. He was quiet for a moment, just watching her. Yes, and after that, we go back to our normal lives. Nicholas tilted his head slightly. Is that what you want? Lucy felt a lump in her throat. That was exactly the question she had been trying to avoid. The contract would end, she would go back to her life, and Nicholas would remain the unreachable billionaire he had always been. That's how it should be. So why did the idea of leaving make her chest ache? She forced a smile. Of course, that was the deal, right? Nicholas kept his gaze fixed on her. If you say so, there was something in his tone that made Lucy hesitate. It was almost like he was waiting for her to say something else, but she couldn't, because admitting she wanted more meant taking a risk, and Lucy had never been good with risks. The following days passed too quickly. Lucy tried to convince herself that everything was fine. She kept going through her routine, ignoring the tightness in her chest every time she thought about the day she would have to pack her bags and leave the house. Nicholas, on the other hand, seemed more distant. He was still kind, still doing his part perfectly, but there was a certain heaviness in the air. It was like they both knew something was about to change, but neither of them wanted to be the first to admit it. Then the night before the contract ended, Nicholas finally broke the silence. Have you packed your things? Lucy looked at him from across the room. Not yet, Nicholas nodded slowly without saying anything. She wanted to ask him if he wanted her to stay, if this had all just been a game for him, or if, like her, he was also struggling with something that felt bigger than both of them. But instead she just smiled and said, I'll leave tomorrow morning. Nicholas nodded once more. All right. The next morning, Lucy was finishing packing her suitcase when she heard a knock on the door. She took a deep breath before opening it. It was Nicholas. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, with an expression Lucy couldn't quite read. Are you really leaving? He asked, his voice lower than usual. Lucy tried to smile, but she failed miserably. That was the plan from the start, wasn't it? Nicholas kept looking at her. Plans change. Luke felt her heart race. Nicholas, he took a step forward. Answer me. This, if I asked you to stay, would you stay? Lucy opened her mouth, but no words came out. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. Since the second she realized this was no longer just a contract. She could simply say yes. She could admit that at some point this stopped being a facade for her. But what if Nicholas was only asking out of pride? What if as soon as she said yes, he would realize he didn't want this after all? She couldn't risk it. So forcing a smile, she answered Nicholas, don't make this harder than it already is. His eyes brightened for a second, but he just nodded slowly. I understand. And without saying anything else, he left. Lucy closed her eyes, feeling a pain in her chest. She didn't want to admit. She grabbed her suitcase, took a deep breath, and left. The following days were a blur. Lucy went back to her old routine, but nothing seemed right. Her apartment felt smaller. The coffee she used to love didn't taste the same anymore. And everything, absolutely everything, reminded her of Nicholas. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it was normal. After all, they had spent so much time together. It was obvious it would take some time to get used to life without him. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. Now let's continue the story. But then a week later, as she was passing by the window of a jewelry store at the mall, something caught her eye. The necklace, the same necklace Nicholas had given her that night before the charity event. She stopped and thus stared at the piece, feeling her heart tighten, and then she realized she had made a mistake. Lucy didn't waste any time. She took a taxi and went straight to Nicholas's house. The ride seemed longer than usual, and her heart was pounding in her chest when she finally arrived. She took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Time seemed to drag until the door finally opened. Nicholas was there, the same intense look, the same controlled posture, but for a moment Lucy saw surprise in his eyes. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" She took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. But then she realized she didn't need a long speech. She just took a step forward, lifted her face and kissed him. It was different from the first kiss. There was no desperation, no impulse. There was something real when she pulled away. She looked at him and smiled. "I want to stay for a moment." Nicholas didn't say anything. He just watched her as if he wanted to make sure she was really there. And then finally he smiled. "Took you a while to realize that, huh?" Lucy laughed, feeling lighter for the first time in days, you could have told. At first she feared it was just a fleeting dream, but day by day she realized it wasn't. It was real, and to her total surprise, Nicholas seemed more and more comfortable with the idea of having her in his life. Lucy still left her socks lying around, organized the clothes by color, but somehow it worked. She had never been so happy. But what she didn't know was that Nicholas had a plan, a big plan, and it involved a certain very shiny ring. It all started suspiciously. Nicholas started acting strange. He made mysterious phone calls, seemed lost in thought, and on a few occasions left without saying where he was going. Lucy tried to ignore it. Maybe he was just dealing with something at work. But after a week of suspicious behavior, she decided she needed to investigate. So she did the only logical thing. She followed Nicholas, with sunglasses and a huge coat, which definitely made her look more like a character from a comedy movie than a real spy. Lucy trailed him through the streets of New York, trying to figure out his secret, until he stopped at a jewelry store. Lucy almost had a mini heart attack. He was buying a ring. If it was an engagement ring, she might have had to pretend to faint just to have time to process the information. But Nicholas didn't go into the store. He just talked to someone at the door and then left. Lucy, now too curious to back off, decided to go in. The saleswoman greeted her with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" Lucy smiled nervously. "Yes, A tall, handsome, and somewhat methodical man just walked by. Was he buying something?" The saleswoman blinked a few times. "You mean Nicholas Scott?" Lucy forced a smile. "Yeah, that's him," the woman laughed. "He was arranging something special." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Something special, like really special. The saleswoman smiled mysteriously. "You'll see soon." Lucy left the store with sweaty palms and a racing heart. Now all she had to do was wait the following weekend. Nicholas invited her to a special dinner. Lucy was already suspicious, so when he took her to an insanely fancy restaurant with a view of the entire city, she knew something was about to happen, and it did. After dinner, Nicholas took her to the building's rooftop. The night breeze was gently blowing, and the city lights sparkled below them. Lucy looked around, feeling emotional at the view. "This is beautiful, Nicholas," he smiled. "Not as beautiful as you." Lucy blinked. "Wow, that was unexpectedly romantic. I have a few more surprises for you," before she could ask what he meant. Nicholas knelt down. Lucy froze. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure she was about to faint. Nicholas pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a stunning ring. Lucy brought her hands to her face. "Oh my God," Nicholas smiled. "Lucy Cooper, I never planned on falling for you, but it happened. You messed up my routine, made me laugh when I didn't want to, and showed me that life can be fun even when it feels like chaos." Lucy felt her eyes fill with tears. "That was unexpectedly sweet," he laughed. "So my messy and adorable Lucy, will you marry me?" Lucy was so emotional, she forgot how to breathe. But as always, her instinct was to make the moment unique. So instead of responding traditionally, she pretended to be deep in thought. I don't know. Are you ready for a future where your clothes will never be perfectly organized by color again?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "I've already accepted that reality, and where my collection of socks scattered around the apartment will continue to grow uncontrollably. It'll be a challenge, but I accept it." Lucy laughed, wiping away a tear. Then I guess I have no choice. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Does that mean? Yes, she smiled. Yes, he stood up, picked her up in his arms and spun her round before kissing her. And it was right there in that moment that Lucy realized that kiss was completely different from the first one. This time there were no more doubts, they were real. The wedding was a true spectacle. The ceremony took place outdoors in a charming garden, decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights. Nicholas, in a perfectly tailored suit, waited falter, with a smile that made Lucy's heart melt. She walked down the aisle to the sound of soft music, feeling like this was the most beautiful moment of her life when she finally reached the altar. Nicholas took her hand. You look beautiful. Lucy smiled. You're not so bad yourself. The vows were emotional. Nicholas talked about how he never imagined an unexpected kiss would change his life. Lucy talked about how he taught her that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. And then finally they said I do when Nicholas kissed her this time. Lucy knew there was no longer a contract, a plan, or an agreement. There was only them together forever. What did you think of Lucy and Nicholas? Story, leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to follow all our stories, and feel free to watch more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.